Over 2017, I probably talked daily to business owners and different executives across the region, and the leading topic was not politicians or transportation or education or even some kind of vast left-wing conspiracy. No, it was actually about the frustration that many feel about progress. It's probably more important than ever that we talk about this because the importance that we have of elevating our expectations as a Baton Rouge business community and as leaders in general in Baton Rouge. I want to talk about that today and reflect upon their sentiments that I heard over last year and also some of the work that we've been doing in our 5-year plan. Their perspectives were also front and center for me as we were decamping from our office building last year after 32 years since the last major renovation took place back in the mid-'80s. And if you were inside the building, it was like a living metaphor of the bad hair of the '80s every day that we got to live in the middle of. In it, we also found boxes that probably hadn't seen sunlight since the Reagan administration. And the news clippings we found, yes, there were news clippings. Still, paper was better storage than anything else. News clippings about things that still trouble us and plague us today. And so you can imagine why that persistent concern about progress is out there even today. Issues like transportation, education, beautification crossed the gamut of the stories that we saw going back to the beginnings of our organization. But we also saw stories looking back of a Chamber of Commerce that made big priorities about what it takes to drive change across the region. And over the last century, we saw examples of that. And we have to take that lesson as we look forward into the work of next year of how it's important to make choices and trade-offs about what the big priorities are for our organization, but also as leaders of the community. Over the next 20 minutes, I want to try to cover some of the work that we did in 2017, some of the priorities we have as we lead into the next year. Now, many of you will recall, let's see if this works. And maybe not. Michael, I might need help. Uh-oh. Want to take a look? Sorry about that. Many of you are going to recall from past press club speeches that we have a 5-year plan that we operate against, and those goals are, there's 4 big goals. I'm going to talk through those today and how we structure the work that we do. Most memorably, the things that people pay attention to really have to do with the job numbers of the year. So let's talk about that from last year. In the last 12 months of work, we saw 12 economic development projects announced across the 9-parish area. We saw these companies announce 683 jobs, almost $30 million in payroll, as you can see on the screen, and 600 jobs or $600 million in capital expenditures. We actually saw an uptick in business development activity over the course of the year. There was a period of uncertainty following the national election. We also had a flood events and some other difficulties in 2016, and we came out of that with more activity in 2018 or 2017. And since the tax bill passed at the end of last year, we've seen that continued rise and uptick in our early prospect activity even into 2018, which is a good context, I think, for talking about where we are as a regional economy. The headlines last year might have led you to believe at the end of the last year that the regional economy was actually flat. So there are 3 indicators from our economic outlook that I want to call to your attention to reflect upon that. First, the unemployment rate as of the last report was 3.7%, an incredibly low unemployment rate for the Baton Rouge area, which shows that people in our community, our citizens, are finding opportunities in the job market that is available today. Second, the actual non-farm job growth rate last year was almost 2%, adding just shy of 8,000 jobs over the last 12 months, headed up by healthcare, hospitality in the leisure sector, construction, and manufacturing as growth sectors overall. And then the third point shown on this slide is that the forecast for next year is continued economic growth, and that trend should be one that is a sustained period we've seen going back to the national recession to today. The point of which is to say the Baton Rouge area continues to be a growing economy with very healthy economic indicators. The question then for an organization like ours is, what do we do to make sure we accelerate the growth, the activity in business development, while at the same time making sure we're paying more attention than ever to issues of quality of life and quality of place, of access to talented people, and to elevating our region's external image, which gets us into our strategic plan and the results of last year. So one of my favorite projects last year that announced actually attributes to that first goal, which is to grow and diversify the Baton Rouge area economy. Working last year with Mary Bird Perkins, Our Lady of the Lake, who partnered with other competing hospitals. They worked together with our business development team, LED, and many others to announce the Provident Proton Care Project, announcing $10 million in payroll, 95 jobs, and $95 million in capital investment. Healthcare really was a prominent story in economic development coming out of last year. There's more than $500 million in capital investment happening today in the Baton Rouge Health District, which we think is a great way to think about the goal of diversifying the economy into sectors that are fast-growing, high-wage sectors for the future. We also predicted in our speech to you last year that it was more important than ever for us as an organization to focus on existing businesses. And I'm proud to say that 9 of the 12 deals that were announced on the earlier side came from existing companies in the 9-parish area, small and large businesses announcing new project activity in the region. To get there, we visited over 150 different companies in the region, seeking to support their growth opportunities. The most recent announcement that was in the paper actually came out last week from PacTech, a project that we visited last year. PacTech is an East Feliciana-based manufacturer expanding in East Baton Rouge, whose products are exported globally. The combined work of BRAC's efforts in economic development of the last 2 years under this first goal have now produced $75 million in payroll going back to 2016 and over 1,600 direct jobs. So looking at Goal 2, Chuck McMillan is a great way to embody the story of the work of Goal 2, which is to cultivate the region's talent. Chuck is the general manager at Community Coffee's Coffee Services Division, and he was a member of a candidate tour that he and his family took with our staff back in March of 2016. Now, I want to just read this quote, but let me kind of tell you briefly what we do on these tours. On the tours that we do, the company is really selling the job to the prospective employee, but BRAC is selling the region to them, trying to help companies, trying to help the talent make sure that they understand why the quality of life here is well suited to their family. In this quote, and I love this line, he says, "We moved several times, but we never had such a wonderful experience as we did with our tour of the Baton Rouge community. After the tour, we knew it would be a great place to call home." This is a non-native to Baton Rouge, an Alabama fan, and he has kids in high school choosing to live here over other places he could have moved to because of the opportunities here. Our talent program is about changing the trajectory of the in-migration of people into our region, one that has plagued us for decades and one that is critical to the future growth of our companies. Over the past 2 years, we've seen now 250 different executives and their families who have been a part of the tours, direct, customized tours and group tours that we do to help families like Chuck's to move into the Baton Rouge area. But the goal, too, is more than just about running tours. We also want to make sure we pay attention to things like graduate retention through things like our intern BR program, which had our second year last year. We also last year launched something called the Connect platform, which helps people that are newcomers to the region make connections to folks who are long-time residents to make sure that they build early relationships that can lead to deep roots in the Baton Rouge area. Under Goal 2, we also operate a lot of work in education and workforce policy to try to make sure we're thinking about the talent pipeline holistically. Last year, we raised our game for business partnerships with schools. We launched in 2016 a virtual schoolhouse. Last year, we saw 75 different executives take place in this. You can see the picture in the classroom. Teachers incorporate the work of these videos that are taken by our executives. Over 2,000 students were reached last year through the work of these executives to get into the classroom and talk about practical applications for what their careers, what their learning could be focused on. We also helped 5 different employers launch partnerships with our community colleges, including IBM, who have secured now a new partnership on tech talent and software coding. And we encouraged many of our employers to pursue greater diversity in their hiring practices through our Diversity in Business event, which had its second ever event last year, focused really on how you diversify your management teams. We're going to do that our 3rd year this year. Now, we can also say that when we broaden our pools of talent, or when we're trying to attract more businesses, all of that rests upon the product that we're selling, which is the quality of life of the Baton Rouge area, which brings us to the goal 3, which is to transform our region's quality of life. Now, transportation has been the number one obstacle to doing business in all of our business surveys going back a number of years, and it really is the number one factor for quality of life that we're faced with right now. It's also, we know, a long-term, multi-year engagement that we have to be focused on if we want to try to deliver solutions. Now, we launched back in 2015 something called the Crisis Coalition, partnering with the Greater Baton Rouge Industrial Alliance and the Center for Planning Excellence, really trying to unify the 9-parish area business community to focus on these high-priority solutions and to speak with one voice about the solutions necessary for transportation relief. And 1 week now, in early 2018, we saw 2 big wins finally break through when it seemed like all might have been lost. We saw the governor announced a widening project, the groundbreaking in Ascension Parish 2 weeks ago, as well as the new I-10 widening that's been announced with Garvey bond funding for East Baton Rouge from the bridge to the split. Now, these are regional projects, and they will be producing, we think, traffic relief for many, many years to come once put in place. But it has been the product of many, many years of policy engagement and political pressure in order to arrive at the point that the Garvey bond funding tool that was announced, for example, was prioritized for the Baton Rouge region. For years, we had seen that it was the Baton Rouge area who was passed up for projects rather than the one that was selected. And we don't think that happens by accident. It happens with a lot of people calling for action and our leaders statewide paying attention. Now, in 2017, BRAC and Crisis also pushed for a statewide passage of a gas tax with the recognition that more funding is necessary to try to deliver on substantial traffic relief. We also think more needs to be done than just the 2 projects that have so far been announced. We also completed the Capital Region Mobility Strategy to look at not only broad solutions, but very specific options and tools that can be used to create greater workforce mobility across the 9-parish area. Now, quality of life is also about the quality of schools in our region. Last year, we worked with a lot of folks to bring schools like Basis Baton Rouge, which is pictured here. A lot of these schools who announced new schools that are opening, some of the best education options that are being announced in Louisiana, and they're happening right here. Over the last 2 years of work, we've now seen 9 different school options announced that are through the traditional school systems, as well as new public charter options that are coming. And these announcements, we think, point to a new trend, an emerging trend that is building momentum, where you're seeing more and more quality schools that are accessible regardless of race, neighborhood, or income. And as a parent with 3 kids in the public education system in East Baton Rouge, as well as being a leader at BRAC, it's exciting to see that these changes are now taking shape, and I'm really excited to see where 5 or 10 years from now, where this trend is going to lead us to. Last year, our team also started to dig more deeply into the issues of quality of place, which is really a visible reflection of the expectations that we as a community have of ourselves. Our team last year drove up and down College and Perkins doing an audit to try to take stock of what it is that is the current condition of the infrastructure that is how we currently maintain that infrastructure. It was also something that then led to, in December, a surge of activity by the Public Works Department to try to clean up and update and fix some of the major problems along those corridors. This project was also highlighted by Mayor Broom's State of the City speech about a partnership between BRAC and East Baton Rouge. The reason we're doing this, though, is not just because it's important to see cleanup on that single corridor. This is about leading to systemic changes of maintenance, hoping ultimately to build a new muscle memory for public works, not just in East Baton Rouge, but across the 9-parish area, and one that elevates the expectations of what we as citizens expect our community to look like. And I know that many of us travel for business or for pleasure and see other places that look cleaner, look better maintained, and that starts with us as citizens expecting more out of our community and doing more ourselves to maintain that community quality. I should say this is a project we're doing not just an audit in the College and Perkins area, we also did along Plank Road. We saw that the infrastructure has no divide north or south. It is horrendous wherever you go. The maintenance has been behind, and we're pleased to see that the city is responding with adequate activity on this over the last few months. Now, the narrative of downtown is also important to think of in the example of of what we saw in downtown over the last really decade or decade and a half. And it comes from setting expectations much higher, planning for different changes, and seeing that systems of government respond. Now imagine if the metaphor that is what has happened downtown can be reflected upon that College and Perkins corridor or along Plank Road, what that then does to set a different expectation for our citizens about the quality of our community for investment, for opportunity, and for their own lives. We think that trend will be carried forth by other things we were working on in support of last year, including the upgrades and improvement in the redevelopment authority, the new BREC bicycle plan that's underway, some of the work on Government Street to change what that appearance is going to look like over the next 2 years. These are all great examples, we think, of changes in quality of life that we're going to be able to use to sell Baton Rouge, but also retain talent in our community. Now, at the start of 2017, we were also just overcoming the effects, really, of the flood and of the 2 shooting incidents that occurred. Those effects also led to some concerns about how we were perceived nationally. I shared with y'all last year that in our national survey that we did in 2016, we have suffered from a low awareness just of the name of the city of Baton Rouge when we tested it nationally among external markets. And so we committed to ourselves that BRAC would attempt to do something about it, and we put our resources forward to do it. We got partnership from Visit Baton Rouge, the Baton Rouge Airport, the Baton Rouge Area Foundation, and we secured a contract, we think one of the first of its kind, at least in recent memory, to get a national PR firm working solely on the idea of improving the awareness of the activity and the quality of life in the Baton Rouge area. And we've now already seen results. This is now 6 months into that contract. We've seen 20 different media stories written mentioning or about the Baton Rouge area, about our quality of life, about our culinary options that are available here, and not just in Southern magazines. These are in Wine Enthusiast, the Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times. It's the ad equivalency of already $700,000 worth of ad spending from just the work of the first 6 months. Now think about this in the long run. This is the beginning of a trend that we think is going to be something we're going to carry forward for many years. What can that do now for talent migration? What can that do for businesses choosing to make an investment in the Baton Rouge area? Our marketing team also worked to launch a new blog, to put out a new quality of life portal for our talent services that we can reference life in the Baton Rouge area directly on parts of our website. We launched a talent testimonial video campaign to try to highlight those stories like Chuck's that I showed earlier. We also hosted over 16 different business events that attracted over 2,300 participants to come to our activities. And we continue to partnership in the super region with Greater New Orleans, Inc., recognizing that we still have to think at a higher level about how people get to know us. And we named that region the Solo Super Region last year to make sure that we're giving ourselves more marketing tools as we're doing the work to sell the super region as well. So as you can see, over the 2 years of the first launch of our strategic plan, this new strategic plan, we've been making some considerable progress. On all 4 of these, we're now seeing momentum carried forward, which is exciting to be able to report to you today. You can also begin to see how interconnected these goals are. The goal around image connects to attracting talent. The goal around business development connects to our ability to change the image of the region, as well as to sell the quality of life to others. And that's something we think will continue in our work in 2018, which is on your table in front of you. We've laid out in the strategic plan that's on your tables the goals for this year, and I want to highlight 4 that our board of directors really see as very important priorities that will continue the direction that we have into the new year. First is continue to push forward on the gas pedal to make sure that there's more opportunities for funding for transportation solutions, whether that be at the legislature and seeking more opportunities out of this year's legislative session, as well as pursuing the completion of the funding necessary to secure the I-10 widening, which was a crisis priority that was laid out 2 years ago. The political process to secure the Garvey bonds is one that will take at least 3 steps to get through the process, and it's an important one that we see continued. We also need to continue to make sure that we seek out more local companies for expansions. We see opportunities for that. We also want to push more for new prospects and increasing our lead generation activity in those sectors where we have competitive advantages as a region, whether they be the water sector or healthcare, where we can diversify our economy, taking advantage of the ag center and pursuing ag tech companies, or pursuing those sectors that have been long-term drivers of our growth in manufacturing, which we see more deals in the future as available to us as well. We also intend to work with our local partners and our parish economic development partners on the use of local incentives more and make sure we're following principles that make these incentives predictable and transparent and provide for a return on investment to the public, something that we think is important to protect. And finally, we want to convert our early progress that I highlighted around quality of place from these corridor audits to systemic changes over the course of this year with our parishes, not just in East Baton Rouge, but think about what that looks like when that is now hardwired into the work that is happening proactively by our parishes to take advantage and to clean up what's happening in our community. There's more highlighted in the reports, and I'm happy to talk about those in more depth. Finally, in 2017, it was not just about our external progress, but it was also about our own organization as well. Our building has been something of a white whale for our organization. We've talked about it for more than a decade, about the importance of changing the way that we operate as ourselves in the space that we're in. And I'm proud to say that over the last year, we completed architectural design, we secured early financial pledges, and we went out for bids, and now we were able to begin demolition and construction of a new space for ourselves. The old building, frankly, was terrible. It was terrible for morale of our staff. It was terrible for business development. We did not like to bring prospects to our own building. And it was terrible about the image that it set, about the expectations that we have for ourselves and for our region. And as I said, we have to expect more for our region, and we had to expect more for our building. So I'm proud to show you what it looks like, and you can see this on our website. The new building is going to be the opposite of that. Frankly, it's going to set a tone. We also wanted to change. We also wanted to change the name of the building, which is why we wanted to call it the Center for Economic Development. It is a representation that we as an organization have changed over the last decade, and so must our building change the way it looks and what it represents as a community. We had to take the dusty old frame that we had operated in and make sure that we updated it to a bright, modern, contemporary workspace where we'll be proud to host prospects that shows off the ambition that we have as a region for what we want to become. In the old space, we had too little in the way of conference rooms. Our largest conference room, frankly, sat about 20 people. It had no windows. So now we will have 4 different conference rooms and meeting spaces, the largest of which will be more than adequate to host more than 100 folks. We're going to use that for business meetings as well as nonprofit meetings so that the community can use this as a gathering place. We also are excited about the way that it's going to appear on the street. We think it's important to recommit ourselves at 6th and Laurel to the importance of our business community being in downtown as it has been since we got into this building back in 1952, home to the Chamber of Commerce that was launched almost a century ago, and making sure that we recommit ourselves as a business organization to the role that we play in the Baton Rouge area in leading long-term economic development into bold new directions. You know, I talked at the beginning about the thoughts of our business leaders last year about frustrations and the barriers that they felt. And while we always will face these challenges as a region and we can get mired within them, we think they can be overcome by acting strategically over the long term on a strategic plan that is well grounded in the thoughts of how we create a very balanced and holistic approach to economic development, which is why we say it's important more than ever to think bigger, Baton Rouge, or our hashtag says, Think BR. Thank you all for hosting us. I think we have, Linda, a little time for questions, yes?
Adam, I was noticing on your slide there, Venture Beat Magazine said that Baton Rouge is becoming a gaming hub. Does the gaming and lottery industry put more money into the local economy or take more money out?
Let me make sure I'm specific about the word gaming. This may be important given the building that we are in for today's luncheon. The video game industry has been a part of our software development strategy for many years, going back to 2005 and 2006, when we set an approach towards software as part of our business development approach. What we were highlighting is we've actually seen the Baton Rouge area grow not only as a tech and software hub, but very specifically we've seen out of the Level Up Lab, for example, out at the Louisiana Technology Park, where there currently are 3 different games. I think actually the number there might be up to 5 different games that were launched now out of the Level Up Lab those are startup software companies launching new video game companies in the Baton Rouge area. So that VentureBeat article is about the video game and the tech sector specifically.
Well, that raises the question of the gaming/gambling industry. Ronnie Johnson and the commission are looking at expanding spaces here to change. Have y'all looked at that? Do you have a position on it? And do you feel it's constructive initiative?
So the question has to do with the gaming and gambling industry. The commission that's underway right now has just released a set of recommendations about changes to gaming and gambling laws for Louisiana. We actually presented to the task force on gaming a summary of the number of jobs in the Baton Rouge area. I'd be happy to share that with anybody who wants to take a look at it. But we have seen that since the advent of the 3 casinos in Baton Rouge, gaming has become a significant part of the labor force of the leisure and hospitality sector in the Baton Rouge area. In fact, there was an assumption when L'Auberge arrived that this market would not be able to support 3 riverboat casinos, as they were then called, and may not anymore be called. But at the time, there was an assumption that that might be something that shifted. Instead, since the arrival of L'Auberge, we've seen an expansion in the job market overall. We highlighted this in our numbers that we shared, which is to say we actually think that it's been an important contributing factor to the economy. I don't know that we've actually gone so far as to say that changes to the gaming law will increase the number of jobs, but we do think that it can change some of the quality of the experiences that one can have, and it could potentially contribute more to the downtown area. The 2 older operations are actually centered here around the Baton Rouge area, which could lead to more spending onshore, which is the suggestion you've heard from the gaming industry, that by having the gaming more in proximity to the land rather than across the levee, that could actually make it easier for folks to get access to some of the restaurants and other small businesses in the Baton Rouge community. So I think it's something we actually are interested in watching over the course of the session this year.
Okay, so I'm really impressed with a lot of the programs I saw you outline today, and I'm one of those people that's in the room that worked the last 20 years in the DC market. Local talent has recently returned. How do people like me make sure that we're offering our time and talent to bolster these efforts?
So the question was for someone who's a recent relocator to the Baton Rouge area, welcome back to the Baton Rouge area if it's been recent for you. How can others contribute their time and talents to the work that we're doing? So let me outline 3 ways. One is the Connect platform that's on our website. I would invite you to become a participant on that website. One of the things that we have found is folks that are recently relocated see the Baton Rouge area through fresh eyes, that some of us have been here for longer, maybe jaded, 1, 2, maybe willing to talk about some of the things that they observe and see. They also have the ability to connect in very real ways to folks that are perhaps relocating from the same place. So we really encourage folks to do that. Second is be positive when folks ask you about their experiences in the Baton Rouge area. Too often we are our worst detractors. And so one of the things that's very simple to do is to make sure that folks don't start off with traffic sucks at Baton Rouge. Those kinds of things are negatives that we want to make sure quite seriously it's important to lead off with positives. The third thing, and this kind of goes to the second point, is stop asking people where they went to high school. One of the things that drives us crazy is that it's a suggestion that you had to go to high school somewhere in Louisiana to be relevant and to matter in the Baton Rouge area, which goes to the idea that we want folks to make connections. So ask them where they went to college, what state they're from, what country they're from. Be curious about their background more than about their high school. As a start.
Who designed the new building, the renovation and interiors, and how's it being funded?
So Washer Hill Lipscomb, WHLC was our architect firm. We did a bid of our investors who are architects or firms and selected Washer Hill. The funding work is actually coming from our fundraising efforts to put together the capital campaign for the building. All the details are on our website. It outlines the donors, the early donors who helped come in on the building project, and we've got sort of more funding and fundraising we're going to do to get to the rest of the way. We've gone out for construction funding to get the project started, and we're doing fundraising over the course of the construction period.
I have a
Sure.
Being a gambling hub, that was how I read it. That was when did Baton Rouge become a gambling hub? So, again,
That's right.
Pass that up and change the argument. My second question relates to traffic issue. In this meeting, there was a question asked by one of the state officials, is it true that out of all the money that goes into the highway trust fund, that 11 cents of every dollar is actually used for asphalt or road? Now, I filed a lawsuit that started the highway trust fund back when this government had $229 million worth of gas dedicated to gas tax bridge paving. And they took the money to pay state employees and all the state contractors right with the road that year. And I am astounded that 11 cents of every dollar is actually used to put concrete and asphalt down on the road. And the rest of it goes into other areas other than actual construction. Is that a correct number? Is 11% correct?
So the question, thank you for the observations about the gaming industry, and we'll take that. We didn't write the headline for VentureBeat necessarily, but we appreciate that when we re-show it, we should update that to be more specific. The question had to do with the Transportation Trust Fund and a notion that a small percentage of the Transportation Trust Fund goes to construction. So the answer, or the question is that a true fact? Short answer is no. We actually did some analysis on this back during the gubernatorial election. It was a misnomer that was used in the political process of the gubernatorial election to attack DOTD. And then when you dig into it, you'll find that more than just that number goes toward construction. The question that we asked last year is a bit different, though, which is the state going to be able to deliver transportation solutions for the Baton Rouge area with the revenue that they have if they are able to reprioritize every imaginable amount of dollars out of the current revenue stream in order to deliver what's necessary? We reflected upon the fact that they have a $13 billion backlog of projects, and that does not even include in that $13 billion backlog the roughly $7 billion it would take to build the A and B projects on the statewide master plan. So couple that together, you've got a $20 billion problem, and they have a 16-cent gas tax going to the Transportation Trust Fund and a 4-cent gas tax going to the timed program. And our recognition that there was not going to be any future that we were going to see that led to, for example, a new bridge for the Baton Rouge area, which is the most important large-scale project we have highlighted in our crisis priorities. So when we pushed for a gas tax increase last year, it was a recognition that for the Baton Rouge area, whatever the number is that does go to construction, and Secretary Sean Wilson does a good job of going into depth about what is the real number on construction dollars out of the current TTF. Whatever that real number is, it is not going to deliver on the 4 projects that are necessary. So while we're excited to see the Garvey-Braun project leading to the funding for I-10 as well as the widening, the 2 big hurdles that are still necessary that are out there is additional use of the river crossings or building up new river crossings, use of the 190 bridge, whether that's for a bump or a northern bypass, and then constructing a new southern bridge, both of which are necessary in the long term, in addition to local arterials that have to get added across East Baton Rouge and other parishes.
Adam, talking about the Garvey Fund and the expansion, I know that that's a priority of yours, but there's also some concern by businesses who may be impacted by that extension. Are y'all working, some of those may even be your members,
Yeah.
Are y'all working to assuage those concerns?
No, it's a great question, and the question has to do with the concerns of businesses and citizens living in proximity to where I-10's widening is going to be taking place. Now, the reports that have been released, and we're looking forward to seeing the designs, the constructability plans in final form in 2018. It should come out mid second or third quarter, is what we understand. When that comes out, I think that's probably going to be the thing that most folks are going to be paying attention to. What's been said is they already have the majority of the right-of-way necessary to do what is planned, and so it may minimize the amount of additional right-of-way necessary. And I know that's what a lot of the business owners that we've talked to in that area are going to be paying close attention to. We also saw those business owners of 2 minds, recognizing that it is going to be something that can affect their own businesses, but knowing that something has to be done to address traffic. And we saw so far in comments from business owners and residents a recognition that they know that something has to be done to create additional capacity on I-10. They look forward to the benefit of that in their own lives, but they also want to make sure that the state and the construction plans are mindful of that, whether that's additional sound walls or just working with the business owners about how that is going to affect their day-to-day lives as business owners. What we've been hoping to do is to make sure that the business owners have a way to have an engaged conversation with DOTD and their engineering firms and construction firms about the process in which that's going to take place, the many years over which that construction is going to take place, so they're able to plan accordingly to how that might affect their businesses. But it's something that I think we're just at the beginning of watching that's going to take place, and our organization is going to be very mindful of the importance of that, while making sure that we keep our eyes on what is still necessary as a region, not just one parish, not just one corridor or one small business community, but that the whole region needs to be able to have greater access to transportation solutions.
As spokesman for your organization, I won't put you on the spot by asking you whether you would support or be against the efforts of Together Louisiana to try to do something about, for all our good, the industrial tax exemption program. But is there anything that you would like to comment on with regard to those efforts? Certainly, you could even say whether or not it is impacting, even the discussion is having a negative or positive effect on your member.
Sure. I think the question is, do we want to comment on the changes to the industrial tax exemption program and how that has had an effect or not had an effect on our business development activity? I'll say this. We have been pretty vocal and would direct folks to any of the information that they'd like to go into on our website about the truth and fiction around the industrial tax exemption program. And what we have been focused on over the last year, especially, and will be in 2018, is working to make sure that the program, as it has been now set forth by Governor Edwards, is made functional. And I think that's been really our key priority as an organization, is to get back to a place where the industrial tax exemption is a functional tool in the economic development arsenal. And it has not been as functional as it has needed to be in the last 12 months or 18 months since that creation. We have sought to see a few things, and I alluded to this earlier. That program should be predictable. Businesses need to be able to know how the program works. Parishes also need to be able to know how to set up the program in a way that works for their parishes, to be able to plan around that program on an expenditure side as well as on a business impact side. And third is, and for the public's sake, it needs to be transparent as a program. The deliberations need to be transparent about how projects are decided upon. And then ultimately, it's critical that the means by which we judge these projects is on the question of on return on investment to the taxpayer and to the public. And that's what I think we've been advocating for from the beginning. So what we're going to be looking for hopefully over the course of 2018 is to see that our parishes are able to work through that process, getting back to predictability while ensuring transparency.
I know you're not on the short list of Amazon sites, but are there any plans to talk to Amazon officials or something like that in order to that?
That's a great question. The question is about being not being on the short list of communities for the Amazon project or conversations to be had with prospects. We, as a rule, try not to talk about economic development prospects that we're talking to. Amazon is one of the fastest growing companies in the country, and what we've seen is a state aggressively looking at all ways to possibly go after growth from companies like Amazon. We've been encouraged that the state has been committed to looking at other ways to talk to Amazon about logistics, fulfillment, and distribution. We're hopeful that there are ways that we can see more of that activity in the Baton Rouge area in the future. It's important, though, to think about that project as an example of the kind of work that's necessary to deliver long-term results. The RFP that came out from Amazon really talked about a lot of the quality of life attributes that are necessary to support companies like theirs that can be very competitive about their decision about where they choose to go. And so what we saw in their project RFP is they talked about transit options. They talked about education options. They talked about access to talent. And they talked about international and flight options. Those are all things that are necessary for our community leaders to be looking at when we think about how every company chooses whether they want to invest here, whether they are already here, a small business like Tin Roof that made an expansion last year and could go anywhere to build a craft brewery manufacturing facility, and they choose to stay here in the Baton Rouge area because of the market access, but also because of the quality of life that's here, or a company as large as Amazon and the growth that's necessary to get projects like that is something that we have to be paying attention to. But I think it calls into question the kind of strategic plan that we've outlined that doesn't just look at business development, it looks at quality of life, talent, and external image necessary to succeed. Over here, and I'll come back.
I only heard the word airport once, and that was in connection with hiring a PR firm. Is there anything specific that BRAC is doing to improve air service in that airport?
The question has to do with air service and whether BRAC is doing anything to work with our airport on improved air service. We have had a position for many years that we think the Baton Rouge Airport is an important asset to the Baton Rouge area, and we've been focused in partnership with them on two different priorities. One is to view the airport as a physical asset for projects to consider when locating in the Baton Rouge area. We help with the site certification of the Baton Rouge Airport as one of our certified sites for manufacturers to consider, which has now gone through the certification process and is listed on our website, their air park, as one of the great opportunities for where to locate in the Baton Rouge area. The second priority has to do with what you're asking about, which is air service access. And something we've done in the past with their airport is to actually travel with them. A couple of years ago, most recently this past year, looking at different ways they can compete for additional air service. They also live within a very competitive environment for air service. Being 80 miles away or 60 miles away from a very large airport, now international airport at MSY, has created a lot of leakage for the Baton Rouge Airport. And I know they've tried to go after air service by looking both at leakage to places like Houston, where folks are driving to either Houston or driving to New Orleans to fly to Houston, or other markets like that where they think and we think they can pick up more air service and would do a lot of good if they were able to pick up some of those additional markets for us. We think that there's also opportunities for them to consider, and we've been talking with them about this, different kinds of incentive tools to go after additional air flights. And I know that the airport has been looking at what their options might be. They secured a few years ago a grant from the federal government to go after an additional flight to Washington, D.C., and they think that there might be other opportunities where they can do more of that kind of work. But it's something that doesn't happen overnight, and it's something that we've been trying to do in partnership. They do have a consultant on their contract that is specifically working with them to go after additional flights, and direct you probably over to the folks at Baton Rouge Airport to talk about some of the progress they've been making on that. I'm going to go over here and then come back.
In regards to the I-10 widening of I-10 or the building of I-10, will that eliminate the one lane, or when you come down to one lane off the bridge? Is that in the plans?
Yeah, in fact, if you didn't see the governor's remarks when he announced the I-10 widening, he actually started by talking about a project that is going to be let this month for construction that will ultimately build a new exit on Terrace Street for I-110 to be able to exit into Old South Baton Rouge. And ultimately the plan is that they would have to then apply to the feds to be able to seek the closure of the Washington Street exit. That is something that the governor has talked about now for over a year, and something that we're very hopeful will ultimately lead, even before the I-10 widening project is complete, is to be able to have full access to both lanes coming off of the bridge as you're heading eastbound. The widening project, though, is something that the governor and the DOTD has said for a long time is where we will actually see traffic relief. Now, it'll be nice to get both of those lanes, but it may not ultimately lead to the traffic relief that is necessary to have the additional lane in each direction, which is why this project has been one of the crisis priorities for many years, not just or only the closure of Washington Street, which gets talked about quite a lot, but really is not, in the long run, the answer to traffic congestion on that corridor, which is more capacity ultimately.
One more question.
Okay, one more.
Does the chamber recognize climate change, and does it have contingency plans? Could that affect our chemical corridor?
So we've not really delved into the issues of climate change as a policy organization or as a policy topic for our organization. We tend to try to deal with policy topics that are directly within the sort of the economic development frame of the 9 parishes, the kind of the 4 big goals that I highlighted. Do we think it has an effect, or do we think the federal government's policies can have an effect? Sure, it's something we are been mindful of, but mostly, I think, as it pertains to what policies come down from the federal government and how it affects the near-term opportunities for expansion of sectors, or how it affects transportation projects. Either way, something that we've been mindful of for a long time. But we really try to live within the frame of work policy at a state and local level that directly is impacted by policies we can be involved in here at home.